The sun sank low over the sprawling lands of her father's ranch, turning the sky into a canvas of gold and crimson. Clara Weston stood on the veranda, her slender hands gripping the railing as though it were the only thing anchoring her in a world spinning out of her control. She was 20 summers old, a woman of grace and quiet intelligence, but her life was not her own. Her father, Samuel Weston, was a rancher of considerable influence. Over the years he had carved wealth out of the unforgiving land, and he intended to secure that legacy through her marriage. For weeks now, preparations had been underway for the arrival of Charles Whitmore, a gentleman from Boston whose family's wealth rivaled their own. The arrangement was simple. Charles would gain prestige in the untamed West, and Samuel Weston would cement his family's name with Eastern money and respectability. Clara, however, did not feel the simplicity of it. Her heart carried the weight of uncertainty and dread. Charles Whitmore's letters, carefully folded and tucked away in her dresser, spoke of business, etiquette, and obligation, but not of warmth, affection, or understanding. He had praised her father's judgment in arranging the match, admired the ranch's prospects, and mentioned the virtue of obedience in a wife. Nowhere did his words reflect the tenderness Clara longed for. That morning, Clara's mother had reminded her of duty, speaking of gowns, china patterns, and the honor of becoming Mrs. Charles Whitmore. Clara had nodded, smiling faintly as though she accepted her fate, but inside a storm brewed. She did not wish to be caged in parlors and drawing rooms, admired like a painting while her soul starved for freedom. The West itself had shaped her spirit. She had grown up riding horses across the vast plains, her skirts whipping in the wind, her laughter echoing across the open fields. She had touched the earth after rain, listened to the cry of hawks circling above, and felt the whisper of independence that the wide land breathed into her bones. How, then, could she surrender herself to a man who would measure her worth by how quietly she obeyed? As twilight deepened, Clara left the veranda and walked toward the corral, where her mare Daisy pawed the ground impatiently. Stroking the horse's mane, Clara whispered, "At least you are free, my sweet girl. Free to run as fast as the wind takes you." Her brother, Henry, younger but sharp-eyed, leaned on the fence, watching her. "You don't look happy about Whitmore's visit," he said quietly. Clara forced a smile. "Do I have a choice, Henry?" "Maybe not with father," Henry replied, his voice low. "But choices have a way of finding those who truly want them." She looked at him, startled, as if he had spoken some prophecy she did not yet understand. That night, as lanterns glowed in the Weston house and her parents spoke eagerly of the wealth and status the marriage would bring, Clara sat silently, her thoughts drifting beyond the ranch. Somewhere out in the darkened hills, far from the polished boots of Charles Whitmore, lived people who belonged to the land as surely as the rivers and mountains. She had glimpsed them only from afar, proud Apache riders who moved with the rhythm of the earth itself. They were spoken of in whispers, often with fear, sometimes with resentment. But Clara did not fear them. She had always felt, though she could not explain why, that their presence stirred something restless and alive within her, and though she did not yet know it, the path her father had chosen for her was about to collide with another. A path her father had chosen for her was about to collide with another, a Thassin path carved by a man whose spirit could never be tamed by gold, wealth, or society's expectations. The man who would steal her heart was closer than she realized. The following morning dawned bright, with a sky so wide it seemed to swallow every worry. Clara rode Daisy across the farm meadow, the soft drumming of hooves matching the wild beat of her heart. With each mile between herself and the house, she felt lighter, as if the open plains themselves could sweep away her dread of Charles Whitmore's imminent arrival. The September air carried the crisp scent of sage and sun-warmed grass. Clara urged Daisy into a gallop, her hair spilling loose from its pins, her laughter stolen by the wind. For a brief while, she was no longer the daughter bound to duty, but a creature of freedom. Racing the hawks overhead, she slowed only when Daisy pricked her ears, nostrils flaring. Clara followed the mare's gaze and froze. Across the rise, not 30 yards away, a figure sat astride a painted horse. He was unlike any man she had ever seen. Broad-shouldered, with long black hair bound loosely, the Apache warrior watched her in silence. His posture was proud, commanding, yet there was no threat in his stillness, only a calm that unsettled. Her more than open hostility might have. Clara's breath caught. She had been warned countless times not to wander too far alone, that Apaches were dangerous, untamed, a people apart. But as the sunlight touched his features, she saw no menace in him, only strength etched into sharp lines of a face carved by both hardship and honor. For a long moment, neither moved. Daisy stamped nervously, and Clara tightened her hold on the reins, torn between instinct and something deeper she could not name. Then, to her surprise, the warrior nudged his horse forward, closing the space between them with a measured grace. When he was near enough for her to see the deep bronze of his skin and the piercing darkness of his eyes, he spoke not in anger, but in English colored with his native cadence. "You should not ride so far alone." Clara stiffened. I often do," she replied, her voice trembling against her will. His gaze swept the horizon, as if measuring threats she could not see. Then his eyes returned to her, steady and unflinching. "This land is not as safe as you believe." Something in his tone, firm but not unkind, stirred her. She lifted her chin, trying to reclaim the composure drilled into her by society. "And yet you are here." A flicker of amusement, barely there, touched his expression. "I belong here." "You do not." His words pricked her pride, but they also fascinated her. She had never been spoken to so directly, without pretense or courtesy meant to flatter. It was as though he looked through her silks and manners and saw the restless soul beneath. Before she could reply, a sharp rattling sound cut through the air. Clara glanced down to see a rattlesnake coiled near Daisy's hooves. The mare reared in terror, nearly unseating her. Clara cried out, clutching the saddle horn. The Apache moved instantly. With the swiftness of a hawk, he swung down from his horse, a knife flashing in his hand. In one decisive strike, the snake lay still in the dust. Clara's heart hammered as he steadied Daisy's bridle, murmuring low words in a tongue she did not understand. The mare calmed under his touch more quickly than she ever had under hers. Clara stared at him, breathless not just from the scare, but from the raw power and control he radiated. He had saved her with effortless precision, yet he sought no praise. "You are safe now," he said, stepping back. Clara found her voice at last. "Thank you." "I owe you." He cut her off with a small shake of his head. "You owe nothing." Mounting his horse again, he turned as if to leave. "Wait," she called, surprising herself. He paused, glancing back. What is your name?" she asked, her words softer than she intended. For the first time, his eyes softened, a flicker of curiosity mingling with something she could not decipher. "Nantan," he said simply. Then, with a tug of the reins, he rode off across the hills, disappearing into the wild expanse as swiftly as he had appeared. Clara sat frozen, her pulse still racing, her thoughts tangled. She told herself it was just chance, just gratitude for his help. Yet deep inside, she knew her life had shifted in that brief encounter. She whispered his name to herself, tasting the syllables like a secret Nantan. The Apache warrior who had entered her world without invitation and refused to leave her thoughts. 2 days later, the Weston ranch bustled with more activity than Clara had ever seen. Servants scurried about, polishing silver and setting tables, while her mother directed everything with nervous energy. Word had come that Charles Whitmore had finally arrived from Boston. Clara stood before her mirror, her maid fussing with the blue silk gown chosen especially for the occasion. The bodice pinched, the skirts were heavy, and the high collar made her feel strangled. Her mother's voice drifted in from the hall. "Clara, shoulders back. A lady's posture speaks of her breeding." "Yes, mother," Clara murmured, though her heart wasn't in it. She smoothed her skirts, but in her mind she was far from that suffocating room out in the meadow, hearing a deep voice speak her name in a cadence foreign yet compelling. And Nantan. She shook the thought away. She must not think of him. Downstairs, her father's booming laughter echoed. "Charles, my boy." "Welcome, welcome." Clara descended the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a chain tightening around her. At the bottom, her father stood beside a tall, well-groomed man in a tailored coat, his blonde hair slicked back with precision. Charles Whitmore was handsome in a polished way, his boots gleaming, his hands soft, his smile practiced. When his eyes fell on Clara, he stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Miss Weston," he said, his voice smooth but calculated. "You are even lovelier than your father described." Clara inclined her head, murmuring the proper reply. He kissed her gloved hand, lingering just long enough to make her uneasy. Dinner was served, and the evening stretched long. Charles spoke at length of Boston, the theaters, the investments, the elegance of city life. He praised the ranch only in terms of profit and expansion, his eyes alight when discussing cattle numbers and rail connections. Clara listened politely, but the words felt hollow. He did not ask what she liked, what she dreamed of. To him, she was another asset, much like the ranch itself. At one point, Charles leaned closer and said softly, "Your father assures me you are obedient and well-raised. That will make for a harmonious marriage." The word stung. Obedient, as though her worth lay only in compliance. Clara forced a smile, but inside, her chest tightened. She thought of Nantan's piercing gaze, how he had spoken to her not as a possession, but as a being capable of choice. After dinner, Charles offered his arm. "Shall we walk in the garden, Miss Weston?" Reluctantly, Clara agreed. The night air was cool, stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. Yet the beauty of the evening could not ease her discomfort as Charles guided her along the path. With an air of ownership, "I plan to move you to Boston within the year," he said casually. "You'll enjoy society there. A fine home, servants, the best gowns. Of course, you mustn't expect to ride about as you do here. A lady's place is in refinement, not in the dust of horses." Clara stiffened. He had spoken the words gently, but their meaning was a cage. She looked up at the sky, aching for freedom, for air, for the untamed horizon. Charles reached for her hand, his grip firm. "I will take good care of you, Clara. You will be Mrs. Whitmore, and together we shall build an empire worthy of both our names." She gave no answer, her throat too tight to speak. All she could hear was Henry's words echoing in her mind. Choices have a way of finding those who truly want them. As Charles spoke on about business and future plans, Clara's thoughts drifted once more unbidden, unstoppable, to a warrior with dark eyes who had saved her without asking for anything in return. A man whose name alone stirred her heart with dangerous longing. And though Charles Whitmore might claim her hand, Clara feared no. She knew that her heart was already slipping beyond his reach. The days that followed, Charles Whitmore's arrival passed in a haze of obligations. Clara was paraded before neighbors, introduced as the future Mrs. Whitmore, and praised for her beauty and composure. Each compliment felt like a nail hammered into her freedom. Charles never missed a chance to rest his hand on her arm possessively, as though she were already his. On the third afternoon, Clara sought escape. She saddled Daisy and rode hard toward the hills, hoping the wind might carry away her despair. She told herself it was only to clear her mind, but deep down, she knew what, or rather who, she hoped to find. The sky darkened with the sudden temper of a prairie storm. Clouds rolled in, lightning streaked the horizon, and thunder cracked like cannon fire. Clara pulled Daisy to a stop, heart pounding. She was miles from the ranch, the storm closing fast. Turning back was her only choice, but the rain came too quickly, drenching her, blurring her path. Suddenly, Daisy shied violently, rearing with a frightened scream. Clara lost her grip and tumbled to the ground. Pain shot through her as she hit the earth, dazed, rain lashing her face. Through the blur, she saw shadows moving. Not animals, men. Rough voices called out, and Clara realized with a jolt of terror they were drifters, outlaws who had been prowling the outskirts of ranches for weeks. "Well, what do we have here?" One jeered, stepping forward. His eyes glinted with greed as they roamed over her soaked gown. A fine lady, all alone. Clara scrambled backward, fear tightening her chest. "Stay away," she cried, her voice lost in the roar of rain. The men laughed, circling closer. "Don't be afraid, miss," another mocked. "We'll keep you company." Before Clara could scream again, a figure moved between her and the men, silent, swift, as though born of the storm itself. Nantan. His presence was commanding even in the chaos. He stood tall, rain streaming down his face, his eyes like dark fire. The outlaws froze at the sight of him, muttering curses. "Apache," one spat, spitting in the mud. Nantan said nothing. His knife gleamed as lightning split the sky. The air crackled with a tension sharper than the storm. "You best be on your way, Redskin," another growled. "This ain't your business," but Nantan moved with deadly precision, striking the first man before the words finished leaving his lips. A cry of pain tore through the rain. The others lunged, but Clara could hardly follow the blur of motion. He fought like the storm itself, swift, unrelenting, inevitable. Within moments, the men scattered into the darkness, cursing as they fled. Breathless, Clara stared at him, trembling not from fear, but from the intensity of his presence. He turned to her, kneeling slightly. "You are hurt?" Clara shook her head, though her shoulder ached from the fall. I think I am all right." "You saved me." Again, his gaze lingered on her, steady and unreadable. "You should not ride alone, I thought," her words faltered. "I thought I could outrun everything. But I was wrong." Nantan's lips pressed into the faintest shadow of a smile, though his eyes remained grave. "The storm does not ask where you wish to go. It only comes," Clara's breath caught. His words, simple yet profound, seemed to speak not just of weather, but of fate itself. He helped her to her feet, his hand warm and strong against hers. For a moment, she let it linger, unwilling to release the safety she felt in his touch. When Daisy returned, trembling but unharmed, Nantan steadied the mare and lifted Clara into the saddle as though she weighed nothing. As she looked down at him, rain still pouring between them, she whispered, "Why do you help me?" He met her eyes, silent for a long moment. Finally he said, "Because the land put you in my path." Then, before she could ask more, he stepped back, fading into the storm as silently as he had appeared. Clara rode home with her heart pounding harder than the thunder, knowing she could no longer deny it. Charles Whitmore might have her hand, but it was Nantan who had her soul. The storm had passed, but Clara's heart had not settled. Days went by, filled with Charles Whitmore's endless talk of profits and progress, of Boston society and business ventures, but Clara heard little of it. Her thoughts wandered again and again to the hills, to a pair of dark, steady eyes, to the man who seemed carved from the very spirit of the land. At night, when the house grew quiet, she found herself whispering his name into her pillow. Nantan. The syllables felt forbidden. yet comforting, as though speaking them tethered her to something real. One evening, when the weight of her engagement pressed too heavily on her chest, Clara slipped away from the ranch. She told no one, not even Henry, where she was going. The moon hung bright above as she rode Daisy toward the meadow where she had first seen him. She half feared he would not be there, half feared he would. And then, as though the earth itself had answered her restless yearning, she saw him. Nantan emerged from the shadows of the cottonwoods, his presence as natural as the wind. He said nothing at first, simply watching her with those eyes that unsettled and steadied her all at once. "You came," Clara breathed, her voice a mixture of relief and wonder. "You should not be here," he replied, though his tone held no true reproach. "Then why are you?" She countered softly. His gaze lingered on her, unreadable. Finally he said, "Because I knew you would come." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the rustle of the trees and the soft whicker of Daisy. Clara dismounted, her skirts brushing the grass, and stood before him. She felt suddenly small under the weight of the night sky, yet she had never felt more alive. "I don't understand you," she confessed. "Why do you protect me? Twice now you've saved me, though I am nothing to you." "You are not nothing," Nantan said, his voice quiet but firm. "You are different. Not like others of your people." Clara's throat tightened. "Different how?" "You see," he said simply, "not just with eyes, with heart." The words struck her with a force greater than any compliment Charles Whitmore had ever offered. Charles praised her appearance, her obedience, her usefulness. But Nantan, he saw her doubt. Clara lowered her gaze, whispering, "My family has promised me to a man I cannot love, a man who does not see me at all." Her voice trembled, but she lifted her head, meeting Nantan's eyes. "But when I look at you, I feel as if I am seen for the first time." His expression softened, though he remained silent, as if struggling against something within himself. "Do you feel it too?" she asked, her heart pounding so hard she feared he must hear it. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a voice that seemed torn from his very soul, he whispered, "Yes." The night seemed to still, holding its breath. Clara stepped closer, close enough to see the raindrop scar at the edge of his jaw, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. Yet he did not touch her. His restraint was as fierce as the longing in his eyes. "I don't know what will happen," Clara admitted, "but I cannot stop this. I cannot stop us." Nantan's jaw tightened. "It is dangerous. Your people, my people, they will not allow it." "Let them try," she said, her voice breaking with defiance she had never known she possessed. "I would rather face danger with you than safety in a cage with him." The wind stirred the grass around them, carrying her words into the night. For the first time, Nantan reached out, his hand brushing hers, tentative, reverent, as though the touch itself was sacred. And in that moment, under the silver glow of the moon, Clara knew, whatever storms awaited them, she had already chosen her path. The nights Clara stole away became the only moments she felt alive. Under the cloak of stars, she and Nantan met in meadows and along the river banks. They spoke in hushed voices, sharing pieces of themselves as though trading treasures. Clara told him of her childhood on the ranch, of her love for books and horses, of her fear of being trapped in a life not her own. Nantan spoke sparingly, but when he did, his words held the weight of stone and the poetry of wind. "Your world cages you," he told her once, his gaze on the horizon. "Mine teaches me to run free." It was freedom Clara craved most, and with him, she tasted it, even if only for stolen hours, but secrecy is a fragile thing. One evening, as Clara returned to the ranch, her skirts muddied and her hair unpinned, Henry stepped out of the shadows of the barn. His eyes narrowed with worry. "Clara," he whispered, "where have you been?" Clara's heart leapt into her throat. She hesitated, then murmured, I was. Writing. At midnight? Henry pressed, his tone sharp. And don't lie to me, sister. I've seen you. You're meeting someone. Her silence betrayed her. Henry's jaw tightened. It's him, isn't it? The Apache. Clara grabbed his arm, pleading. Henry, please, you cannot tell Father. Do you know what Father would do if he found out? What Whitmore would do? Henry's voice shook with equal parts anger and fear. This isn't just reckless, Clara, it's dangerous. I know, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. But I cannot stop. Henry, with him I feel like myself. Not what Father wants. Not what Whitmore demands. Just me. Henry looked at her for a long time, torn between loyalty to her and loyalty to their family. Finally, he exhaled sharply. I won't say anything. But, Clara, this path will not end easily. His warning haunted her even as she continued to meet Nantan. It wasn't long before others noticed. Clara's mother, ever watchful, frowned at her daughter's dreamy silences and the glow in her eyes. And Charles Whitmore, who prided himself on ownership, began to sense her detachment. One afternoon, Charles cornered her in the parlor. You seem distracted, he said, his smile cold. Is something wrong? Clara forced a polite reply. I am simply tired, Mr. Whitmore. Charles, he corrected sharply. Then, lowering his voice, he added, I hope you understand what's at stake. This marriage is not a matter of affection. It is a union of families, of legacies. Do not mistake it for something else. The chill in his words sent a shiver down Clara's spine. She nodded, but her hands clenched behind her back. That night, when she met Nantan, her heart felt heavier than ever. They will find out, she said, her voice breaking. Henry already knows. My mother suspects. Charles. He watches me like a hawk. Nantan's expression hardened. Then we must end this. No. Clara cried, gripping his hand. Don't say that. I cannot, Nantan. I cannot live without you. He looked at her, torn. The warrior in him longed to protect her by letting her go, but the man whose heart had become entwined with hers, could not. I will not force you, he said at last, his voice low. But know this, the world will not forgive what we are. Clara lifted her chin, her fear swallowed by defiance. Then let the world rage. I will not give you up. And though Nantan held her in silence, his arms strong around her, Clara knew their love had become more than a secret. It was a rebellion, and rebellions always came at a price. The Weston house brimmed with excitement, though for Clara it felt like a funeral. The dining room was dressed with candles and fine china, her mother in pearls, her father flushed with pride. At the head of the table, Charles Whitmore raised his glass, his smile polished, his words rehearsed. To the future, he declared. To prosperity, honor, and the union of two great families. Her father beamed. Here, here. Clara forced a sip of wine, her stomach twisting. Every word was another shackle, every smile a lock on the cage she could not escape. After dinner, Charles asked to speak with her privately. Reluctantly, Clara followed him into the parlor, where the firelight cast shadows that seemed to leer. Charles took her hand, his grip possessive. Clara, it is time we set the date. Your father and I agree spring is too far. The wedding shall be in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. The words struck like a blow. She tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. So soon? She whispered. Why wait? Charles's smile sharpened. There is no reason to delay. The arrangements are simple. You will move to Boston, where a fine home awaits you. You will be introduced to society, and within a year, we will have secured both our families' names for generations. His words dripped with ambition, not affection. Clara's throat tightened. And what of what I want? She asked, her voice trembling. Charles's brows furrowed as though the question itself were absurd. "What you want, my dear, is security, stability, a life of refinement. I will give you all of that. Surely that is enough?" Clara pulled her hand free, her voice rising despite her fear. "Enough for you, perhaps, but not for me." For a heartbeat, Charles's mask slipped. His smile vanished, replaced by a hard, calculating expression. "Clara," he said coldly, "I suggest you remember your duty. Your father's name, your family's honor, all depend upon this union. Do not shame them with foolishness." Her chest heaved, rage burning through her despair. She turned away, unable to bear his gaze. Charles stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. "You will be my wife, Clara. Do not mistake your life for your own. It belongs to your family, and soon to me." The firelight flickered across his face, and for the first time, Clara saw the true man behind the polished charm. Possessive, controlling, dangerous, in ways far colder than the outlaws she had faced in the storm. When he left her in the parlor, Clara sank into a chair, trembling. 6 weeks. 6 weeks until she was locked in a prison of silk and gold. That night, she fled again to the meadow, the moon her only witness. Nantan was waiting, as though he had known she would come. Her tears spilled the moment she saw him. "They've set the date," she choked out. 6 weeks, Nantan. 6 weeks until I'm his." Nantan's jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. "Then we must end this now," he said, though his voice cracked with the effort. "Before it destroys you." Clara seized his hands, her desperation breaking free. "No, don't you see? It will destroy me more to let you go. He speaks of me like a possession, Nantan, like cattle to be traded. But with you, I am free." For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing. His silence stretched, filled only by the cry of a distant coyote. Then, slowly, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her tear-streaked cheek. "If you choose me," he whispered, "there will be no riches, no silks, only hardship and the life my people live, one your world will despise." Clara met his gaze, steady now through her tears. "I choose you, even if it costs me everything." And in that moment, as the fire of defiance burned between them, Clara knew her path was no longer her father's, nor Charles Whitmore's. It was hers. And it led straight into the arms of the man her heart had already chosen. The days crept by like a death march. Each morning Clara woke to the rustle of her mother's excitement, the swish of fabric as seamstresses pinned lace, the chatter of servants carrying flowers through the halls. The Weston house had become a shrine to her impending union, and everywhere Clara turned, she saw reminders of the cage closing around her. Her gown was already being stitched, pearls imported from Boston, invitations sent to family across the state. She smiled when required, nodded when spoken to, but inside she was unraveling, thread by thread. At night, she sought refuge in the meadow. There, away from the suffocating house, she found Nantan. They spoke little, for words were too fragile. He would sit beside her beneath the stars, sometimes brushing her hand with his, sometimes saying nothing at all. The silence was comfort enough. But with each meeting, Clara's desperation grew. The final blow came on the eve of her wedding. Charles arrived earlier than expected, carrying with him a box tied with a ribbon. Inside, a necklace of emeralds glimmered, heavy and cold. "You'll wear this tomorrow," he said, fastening it around her throat himself. His fingers lingered too long on her skin. "It suits you, precious, mine." Clara's breath caught as the jewels pressed against her collarbone. To him, it was a gift. To her, it was a chain. That night, she could not bear it any longer. Long after the house had gone to sleep, she crept from her room, still in her nightgown, her bare feet silent against the wooden floors. She slipped into the meadow, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as though she carried all her life's weight in her palms. And there he was, Nantan. He rose when he saw her, his eyes catching the moonlight. "Clara?" His voice was sharp with worry. "Why are you here so late?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Because I cannot stay. Tomorrow they'll bind me to him, and I'll be lost forever." She grasped his hands with desperate strength. "Take me away, Nantan. Take me anywhere, just not back there." For a long moment he only looked at her, torn between desire and duty. His people had already suffered enough from the encroachment of settlers. To bring her into his world would mean danger for her and for him. Yet, how could he turn from her now, when her eyes pleaded not just for freedom, but for life itself? "You do not know what you ask," he said hoarsely. "My world is not gentle. It is hunger in the winter, enemies at the border, nights spent in shadows. You would leave silk for dust, security for uncertainty. I would leave chains," she cried. "For you." The meadow fell silent but for the whisper of the grass. Nantan closed his eyes, the conflict etched deep into his face. When he opened them, the warrior's resolve had returned, fierce and unyielding. "Then we leave tonight," Clara's breath caught. "Tonight?" He nodded. "If we wait until dawn, you will not be allowed to go. By tomorrow, you will be his forever. We ride now or not at all." Her heart thundered with terror and exhilaration. She thought of her parents, of the shame her departure would bring. She thought of Charles, his cold smile when he realized she had slipped through his grasp. And then she thought of her future, a future in which her spirit was crushed beyond repair. The choice was no choice at all. "I'm ready," she whispered. Nantan pulled her close, wrapping his blanket around her shoulders to guard against the chill. He led her through the dark meadow, where his horse waited, its breath misting in the night air. Clara climbed up behind him, her arms slipping instinctively around his waist. As they rode into the shadows, the Weston estate shrinking in the distance, Clara felt the first true breath of freedom she had ever known. The necklace of emeralds still hung around her neck, but it no longer felt like a chain. It was proof that she had chosen her own path, one that no wealthy gentleman, no parent, no society could dictate. And as the horse carried them into the wilderness, Clara pressed her face against Nantan's back, her tears no longer of despair, but of wild, defiant joy. Dawn broke with fire over the horizon, painting the Weston estate in gold. But inside, panic reigned. Servants whispered in corners, the seamstress clutched her half-finished gown, and Mrs. Weston sat pale and trembling in her chair. Clara's bed was empty, her window flung wide, her nightgown discarded on the floor. It was Mr. Weston who discovered the truth first. The faint tracks in the dew-damp grass, the prints of a horse leading away into the wild. His face burned crimson with fury. "She's gone," he hissed. "Run off like a common thief." Charles Whitmore was less shocked. In truth, he had always sensed Clara's resistance, but her defiance cut him deeper than he cared to admit. His jaw tightened, his pride stung. "She hasn't gone far." "Not with him? Him?" Mrs. Weston gasped, though the tremor in her voice revealed she already knew. Charles's eyes glinted with cold certainty. "The Apache. I warned you this land breeds savagery. She has been deceived, seduced by one of them." The room erupted in scandalized gasps. But for Charles, the matter was not only personal, it was political. To be humiliated by a frontier warrior, to lose his bride to one who had no wealth, no name, no place in society. It was unthinkable. He turned to Mr. Weston, his tone sharp. "We must act swiftly. Every hour they ride puts her farther from reach. Assemble men. Hunters, riders, anyone with a rifle." Mr. Weston hesitated, his fists clenching. He had dreamed of securing his family's place in Boston society, not igniting a manhunt that might ruin them all. But Charles's voice pressed hard, relentless. "If you wish to save her reputation, you must bring her back before word spreads. If it becomes known she has run with an Apache, your name will be finished." Those words sealed it. Within an hour, riders were mounted. Dogs were brought to sniff the trail, rifles slung across shoulders. Charles led the pack, his polished boots dusted from the road. His eyes blazing with fury. Far from the Weston estate, Clara clung to Nantan as the horse galloped across the rugged land. The wind tore through her hair, her heart pounding with every hoof-beat. For the first time, she tasted freedom, wild and raw, but Nantan's instincts were sharp, honed by years of survival. He felt the weight of danger pressing against his back. They would not be left alone for long. By midday, he pulled the horse into the cover of the hills, where juniper and pine grew thick. Clara, flushed and exhilarated, looked at him with hope. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To safety," he answered. But his eyes scanned the horizon constantly, his hand never straying far from the knife at his belt. They dismounted near a stream, the horse drinking deeply. Clara knelt to cup the cool water in her palms, her reflection staring back at her with a strange mix of fear and fierce joy. She was no longer the girl preparing for pearls and lace. She was something freer, bolder. Nantan crouched nearby, his gaze fixed eastward. Clara noticed the tension in his jaw. "They'll come, won't they?" she whispered. He nodded once. "Your father, the man you were promised." "They will not let you go easily." Clara swallowed hard. "Then let them come." "I will not go back." For a moment, Nantan's stern face softened. He reached out, brushing his thumb across her hand. "You are braver than you know." By late afternoon, the sound of distant hoofbeats thundered across the plains. Nantan stiffened, every muscle taut. Clara heard it too, her breath catching. "They found us," she whispered. Nantan grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the trees. "Then we run." They mounted quickly, spurring the horse into motion just as the first riders crested the ridge behind them. Shouts rang out, rifles glinted in the sun. Charles's voice carried across the canyon. "Bring her back alive. Kill the savage if you must." Clara's heart froze at the cruelty of his command. Yet as Nantan urged the horse into the wild, she held tighter, refusing to let go. For the first time, Clara knew the truth. They were not only running for freedom, they were running for their lives. The chase tore across the wilderness, horse and rider pounding over rock and sage. Clara clung to Nantan's waist, her face pressed against his back as the wind stung her eyes. Behind them, the thunder of pursuit grew. Louder shouts, rifle cracks, the baying of hounds. Nantan's horse, though strong, was tiring. Its breath came in heavy bursts, foam flecking its bridle. He knew they could not outrun the pack forever. "We must make a stand," he said, his voice steady but grim. Clara lifted her head, fear twisting in her chest. "A stand? You mean fight?" His eyes, dark and unyielding, met hers. "If we keep running, we both die tired. If we fight, there is a chance." Her heart hammered. She had never touched a weapon, never imagined standing against men like Charles with their polished rifles and trained dogs. But when she looked into Nantan's face, she saw not fear, but fierce resolve. And in that moment, she found her own courage. "Then we fight," she whispered. They veered into a rocky gorge, where towering cliffs walled the narrow pass. Nantan slid from the saddle, helping Clara down. He led the horse deeper into the shadows, then returned with his bow and knife. His movements were swift, practiced, silent as the hawk. Clara crouched beside him, trembling but determined. "What do I do?" He placed a hand on her cheek. "Stay hidden. Only run if I fall." Her breath caught. "Don't say that." "You won't fall." He gave a faint smile, the kind that carried no promise, only truth. The hoofbeats grew louder. Soon the riders poured into the gorge, Charles at their head. His fine coat was dust-streaked, his face twisted in rage. "There!" he shouted, spotting them in the shadows. "Bring her back." Rifles rose. Shots cracked, the sound echoing through the cliffs. Clara flinched, but Nantan moved like wind, loosing arrows swift and sure. 2 riders tumbled from their saddles. Their horses, scattering in panic-dot chaos, erupted. Dogs lunged, snapping and snarling, but Nantan's knife flashed, swift and final. Clara, desperate, grabbed a fallen branch and swung at a hound that came too near. Her fear turned to fury, every strike fueled by her refusal to return to chains. Charles dismounted, stalking forward with pistol drawn. His voice cut through the battle. "Clara, come to me now, and I will spare his life." Clara's chest heaved. For one terrible moment, she almost faltered. But then she remembered his hands fastening the emeralds around her neck like shackles, his voice calling her mine. She stepped from the shadows, her voice clear and defiant. "I would rather die beside him than live as your possession." Charles's face twisted, pride breaking into rage. He raised his pistol at Nantan. The shot rang out sharp final. For an instant, Clara thought she had lost him. But it was Charles who staggered, his pistol slipping from his grasp. Behind him, Mr. Weston lowered the smoking rifle, his face ashen. "Father?" Clara gasped. Mr. Weston's voice broke, torn between shame and sorrow. "I cannot watch you destroyed by this man's pride. If you have chosen him, then go. But do not return." Charles fell, the gorge echoing with the sound of his collapse. The remaining riders hesitated, their loyalty fractured. One by one, they turned back, leaving the canyon to silence. Nantan stood, breathing hard, his bow still in hand. Clara rushed to him, tears streaming. He gathered her close, holding her as though nothing else in the world mattered. Her father lingered at the gorge's edge, his face lined with grief. At last he turned his horse and rode away, leaving them with both freedom and exile. Clara buried her face in Nantan's chest. "It's over." He pressed his forehead to hers. "No, it begins now," and as the sun broke over the cliffs, bathing them in gold, Clara knew she had traded wealth and status for something far greater, that she had chosen love, wild and untamed, and in that choice she had finally chosen herself.